The career of celebrated actress Katharina Schratt, known as the Gracious Lady, was closely intertwined with the highs and lows of the Emperor Franz Joseph. Carolina, Countess of Fuchs-Mollard, dedicated her whole life to Austria's imperial family as Maria Theresa's closest confidant. Archduchess Elisabeth, Crown Prince Rudolf's only daughter, became a combative rebel and the young Austrian's Republic first women's rights activist. What links these three exceptional figures are their important position at court, their willpower and courage. These are three women whose lives, love and suffering are linked inseparably to the House of Habsburg. Here is their story, told by the women themselves. Three Habsburg women. When the Gracious Lady was discussed in Vienna, everybody knew it was Katharina Schratt being spoken of. Not only was she a celebrated actress at the Hofburg Theatre, but was also known as the most important companion of Emperor Franz Joseph. None other than Empress Elisabeth herself brought this relationship about. There's even a painting commemorating their first meeting.
This painting, which is in the Emperor's study to this day, as it did then, we have Empress Elisabeth to thank for. She commissioned the painting, having noticed Emperor Franz Joseph liked going to the theatre when Katharina Schratt was performing. She then decided to entrust the task to Henrik von Angenli, a very well-known artist of the era. There then came the idea to the Empress about her husband. She asked to go into the studio with her to view the portrait. The picture was there for her to see. But not only that, the person it depicted in the flesh. So it came to pass, Elisabeth quite officially introduced her husband, the Emperor, to Katharina Schratt. From that moment, you might say a relationship began that lasted 30 years.
Franz Joseph and Katharina Schratt had a carefree relationship together for 10 years, and the Emperor visited the much younger actress almost every day at her villa near Schratt, which he bought for her himself. Through a twist of fate, however, everything changed in 1898. Empress Elisabeth was killed in Geneva by a fanatic. With Sissi dying, all lightness in their interactions dissipated, and the Emperor's cheery Katie Schratt became sad and fraught with worry.
Even on such a day as this one has to keep one's head on the shoulders. It was a misfortune. I still can't even grasp it. The Empress of Austria is dead, the alleged victim of a madman assailant. What on earth have we wound up in? It's just like in a poor stage play. But it's in real life this time. Such an underhanded murder. A cowardly attack will rock Europe to the core. Fortunately, the Emperor isn't alone. I'm here for him. We'll make this work. When she found out about the attack on Empress Elisabeth and her death, she hadn't long got to Zell am See. Of course, this was all over the media, and she at once travelled back to Vienna to be at Emperor Franz Joseph's side at this difficult time. She was always around, very discreetly, of course, but always by his side. There are also numerous letters in which he expresses thanks for her being there. He wrote that he couldn't discuss the late Empress as well as he could with her, because all three were a steadfast team, knowing and understanding each other so well. That's why, for him, Katharina Schratt dropping everything to be at his side was a special show of support. But this will change everything. At court, the daily to and fro, the monarchy as a whole. Wherever do I begin now? Slowly, one step at a time. Katie, you've got this. I mean it. Annelle? Where can she be? Annelle, we have to prepare. The Emperor didn't want to see me today. He wanted to travel. That's spoken for now.
Over the decades, she more or less passed with him. Katharina Schratt took care of Franz Joseph with great human warmth. This was a real blessing to the Emperor after his wife's death.
He'll need encouragement. We must see to it that he gets something decent to eat. He'll barely touch anything, as usual, but we'll have to serve something decent. A spot of Gugelhupf cake. Something else for a change.
She had a rather special kind of yeast cake, Gugelhupf, baked for him. She also had a cook who specialized in what Franz Joseph liked, i.e. his favorite dishes, when called for. There are these anecdotes saying she always had 4 or 5 of these ersatz cakes baked. Katharina is said to have always been very fearful of the Gugelhupf she baked, for it not turning out well. Like the Empress had, Katharina Schratt led an extremely mundane life and mimicked the former in almost all respects. However, visiting casinos from Vienna to Monte Carlo, and often thereby gambling away huge amounts, was a weakness all her own.
She wrote letters, of course, saying how bad things were for her and so on. She even came out in hives for having lost so much. She then knew what he had to do, that is, to pay off her gambling debts. He'd always acquiesced to this at once, too, without much talk from her about it or her even having to ask. The Emperor's valet, Eugen Kettel, once put it very humorously. He held that Empress Elisabeth, not living modestly either, and Katharina Schratt were the dark, unmoving stars in the Emperor's financial sky. Both of them therefore cost him a lot of money. My soul, the poor man. He really is spared nothing. This is what happens when women think it's apt to travel on their own. Yes, the Empress has, of course, travelled incognito. It shouldn't have been that hard. Countess Owen Ems and I believe everyone present well knew the Empress of Austria was hiding. Throughout their life together, Franz Joseph and Katharina Schratt never used informal pronouns with each other. This was due to him being emperor. Therefore, she always addressed him as such, including in her letters. He called her my dear lady friend. They were thus very discreet in their letters. Schratt did have multiple lovers, aside from the emperor. These included such prominence as Count Wilczek. This meant a difference was made between writing a letter to the emperor and writing one to another gentleman caller. It was the case that Emperor Franz Joseph and Katharina Schratt had a lengthy history of correspondence between them. It's true he resisted using the telephone, not speaking into one for a very long time. He did, however, write very lengthy, very detailed letters in which he explained where he was and his experience of military parades, things that incredibly fatigued the Empress. She'd amassed large boxes of letters sent by her husband from his various marina postings. In any event, she mustn't have read them all, whilst Katharina Schratt was different. She always paid very close attention to the Emperor's writings, offering comment on them. Above all, she also discussed her life. She therefore knew exactly that she was there to entertain, part and parcel of her profession as an actress. She was very good at this and came across as very professional in her letters to the Emperor.
Elizabeth kept arranging meetings and also meals together. For example, in the 1880s, Private dining very often took place within the family, to which she invited Katharina Schratt. In fact, this was dinner for four: Elisabeth, Miss Schratt, the Emperor's youngest daughter Marie Valeria, and Emperor Franz Joseph.
The Emperor is like a bird. The Empress often took nothing but pressed ox's blood because it would strengthen her. She'd regularly corset herself up until there was nothing left on her and get out of breath. This is not to my liking at all. I eat often and enjoy it, as the decent do.
After Elizabeth's death, this fell out of practice, of course, because Katharina Schratt no longer could come to the Hofburg officially or enter Franz Joseph's rooms. The first time Katharina Schratt came into the Emperor's rooms, it was in this bespoke audience dress. It was wholly in keeping with the fashion of the era and must have greatly pleased Franz Joseph.
It should be said about the cut that all women wearing such a dress were, of course, laced. The bust was laced upwards and the waist could be tightened by up to 8 inches by a good corset. Katharina Schratt's back certainly was laced up as far as possible by her maid. As you can clearly see, the strongly accentuated that bore little relation with her actual figure.
For different occasions, Katharina Schratt had clothes tailored in the Empress's style. Even Schratt's travel wardrobe apparently was to be as modern or close enough. Schratt used her clothes quite differently because, in contrast with the restless Empress, she undertook no strenuous, sweat-inducing and compulsory marches.
The Empress actually took the waters. Everyone else would take rest there and stay at a place a few weeks, but not her. She wanted, I'm told, to go on a boat trip. Why, you wonder? Yes, if she actually wanted to. Well, let's find out, just like we do everything. So irksome. People always know everything, talk about everybody, and the quite stupid of them talk about you, meaning everything must always be made public. Secrecy is something noble and important. It seems it's completely gone out of fashion.
Katharina Schratt went to her grave silent over her close relationship with Emperor Franz Joseph. No indiscretion passed the affable and otherwise talksome Hofburg actress's lips.
The Emperor, of course, kept on giving her generous gifts. In the form of a legacy, he actually granted her the permission she actually should have been given. This was naturally the most discreet form. In a manner of speaking, he set up an account for her with a password, with which she could dispose of her assets at will. The amount available from this legacy, per today's conversion rates, corresponds to 18 million euro or so. It then must be remembered that Kaiser Franz Joseph gifted her incredibly exquisite and costly jewelry, mostly from his court jeweler, for all occasions and everything in between.
As an elegant lady of this world, not only was Katharina Schratt enthused by fine jewels, but also by exquisite furnishings.
Amongst other things was a gift from the Emperor of this coffee service. Many of her belongings had her initials engraved on them, like the letter K and S intertwined here. At her villa in Hietzing, there is this KS to be seen everywhere, which is noticeable to this day.
So she could always be near the Emperor. Franz Joseph indirectly made residences available to his darling friend. A prestigious Vienna villa and the Emperor's summer residence, a palace in Bad Ischl. Königswarter Palace was furnished in the opulent style, very modern for its time.
I perhaps should have stopped going on walks. Perhaps the Emperor wants a walk in the garden. When he does it, he bears everything better. I like going on walks with him in Schönbrunn, just at our own pace. The Emperor likes it too. There I share with him the latest little theatre stories. The Emperor likes this claptrap. There's little at court for him to laugh at, which is why he needs me.
Franz Joseph took regular walks with Katharina Schratt. There are hundreds of notes in which Franz Joseph asked his lady friend to come to the Schönbrunn Castle Park at 1 o'clock for a walk together. They also went on these walks together at Bad Ischl. By the dawn of the 20th century, these had already become the stuff of legend.
We've been en route for quite some time. Now we have even more time for our constitutionals together. Just the two of us. Jesus, there's nothing right to wear again. Annal, just where can you be? Yes, what's going on? This new dress we have to.
Franz Joseph's intimate relationship with the energetic Katharina Schratt lasted until the Emperor's death. A born-again Christian, the gracious lady lived in full seclusion thereafter in her Vienna palace.
The age gap between the Emperor and Katharina Schratt was relatively big. She was 23 years younger than him. In any case, it's interesting she died at the same age he did, 86 years of age.
Close friend to the Emperor Franz Joseph, Katharina Schratt lived through the downfall of the Habsburg Empire and the First Austrian Republic. Hitzing Cemetery in Vienna became her final resting place in 1940. In the winter of 1741, joyous anticipation filled the court of Schönbrunn, with Maria Theresa's next child about to be born. Being her closest confidant, Countess Maria Katharina von Fuchs-Mollard would always be by the Empress's side. This time, the Empress would also give birth to her long-awaited Crown Prince. Countess Fuchs was lady-in-waiting and governess at the Viennese court, active for 3 generations of the Habsburg family. She cared for the children of Leopold I, those of his son and successor Charles VI, and then those of the latter's daughter Maria Theresa. Punning in Germany, she'd call for the Countess my vixen, who'd remain her closest confidant and companion for decade, sink or swim.
Carolina Fuchs carved out a classic career for herself, in fact. She came to the court as lady-in-waiting to Leopold I, staying there until her 1710 marriage to Würzburg Ambassador Fuchs.
Having married, she lost her title of lady-in-waiting, but Katharina Fuchs could maintain her good links to the court.
An intimate relationship must have developed between both ladies. Countess Fuchs and the young Maria Theresa, that is, because the latter called her mummy. This was in contrast to her birth mother, Elizabeth Christine, who naturally was also annoyed at her daughter calling someone else mummy.
Carolina Fuchs' extraordinary relationship with the young Empress-to-be lasted far beyond her nursery years. Therefore, it was almost certain the vixen would also be made governess for her own children. A few years later, Countess Fuchs was made chief court mistress, thereby becoming the most powerful woman at court.
She was responsible for who entered the Empress's chamber, She was the only person with unrestricted access. She'd organise audiences and also decide to whom they would be granted or not. That made it quite an important position, and the reason why Maria Theresa chose her was her knowledge she could absolutely trust Countess Fuchs.
Countess, may I remind your grace of the audience?
By all means, can I ask Her Majesty to receive you? I'll do my utmost, but I beseech you to think of something wise. It will otherwise be unpleasant for all involved. Then will you receive an audience at Schönbrunn? The 5th audience today she's to have. Voila. You'd like to put on a decent coat, however. How you look now, you won't even be allowed in. Now go, pray, and leave me to do my business that needs doing. There at last a birth comes. We've all so much to do.
Countess Fuchs also supported Maria Theresa in matters of the heart, even before she was empress. When the young lady was besotted with Franz Stephan, the cunning Gräfin did all she could, and subtly, with foresight, to arrange a meeting between both young lovers.
The two of them, as we notice in their letters, had a real lifelong affection for each other and had funny little names for one another. In Franz Stephan's letters, to begin with, from when they were still married, he'd call her my angelic bride in the form of the time. She called him Karowies, meaning my dear face, or dear countenance, ein Mausling. As the years passed, it got a little more casual, with him calling her Mara, Mitzi, or Mitz.
This relationship, full of love, was unusual for the Viennese court. It not only brought both monarchs together, but also included Countess Fuchs, with this continuing until old age.
It's been documented that Countess Fuchs suffered from the general signs of aging. She could scarcely hear, and her sight was no longer that good. Nonetheless, the imperial couple always sought her counsel. I believe that I'm much too old for this dancing. One dances for joy, of course, but as ladies in waiting, we dance not only for joy. We stand tiptoe, waiting all our lives, always at moral integrity's beck and call for their majesties. Not a year ago did the Empress take the throne, and there's yet another birth in the house, the 4th. Should the Lord smile on us, it will be a boy this time. I have done all in my power to secure this. 1741, the year Joseph II was born, was quite a trying year for Maria Theresa. Her father had died suddenly the previous year. She came to power as a woman, heiress to her father's lands.
The young empress, to begin with, wasn't taken fully seriously. Many thought the inexperienced empress was fair game and could thus easily press their own interests.
They were rather disappointed. Maria Theresa approached the affair incredibly energetically and determined, with much skill and charm. This is what made her so successful. Not relying on her aides, who'd been giving counsel for a century, but instead going her own way and informing herself. The Empress's diligence is incomparable. At night, she studies Prince Eugene's notes unceasingly. She's even learnt to wage war, a woman in such a man's domain. Well, none can mimic her, so what else can there be for her? No one recognizes her anyway. People seem to have long ago forgotten what her father was promised. All Europe is denying it. She also regretted being unable, as a woman, to go to war and lead her army. It was impossible back then. Nonetheless, she took a great interest in it and just educated herself. Taking matters into her own hands is what really made her stand out as a monarch.
Maria Theresa didn't only make novel decisions about waging war, she also stood up to commonplace superstitions of the Baroque period. So she could bear a male heir to the throne, the war lady underwent rather particular rituals during her first childbirth.
Schönbrunn has been in darkness for weeks for us to finally receive a little boy. Finally an heir to the throne. Such a strapping lad like his father. The Empress's mouseling. She is very hardy, giving birth almost yearly in great hope, but only giving us adorable little ladies so far. She means well at heart, but a crown prince would be a great blessing.
At Maria Theresa's Viennese court, there were always a large number of children, often making the atmosphere cheerful. However, over 19 years, the Empress also had to endure 16 life-threatening births, and just 11 of the children she bore would reach adolescence or adulthood. This also explains the great effort needed before giving birth.
The midwives in particular, of course, were influential. They held great power to ensure these old traditions would continue. These were some incredible strategies. We, of course, have always greatly valued having the house properly heated and having Her Majesty get a good sweat on. I'm well aware the heat a mother keeps in will favour a boy and will also smarten him up. Are you still here? The fire's good like that. You can go, thank you. There's many a ritual for us to bear in mind. Going to Mass regularly, drinking mint tea, and walking for long periods backwards. Our Empress, however, my dear Mitz, does it also well regardless. We need not worry.
Should the Empress not have given birth to a male heir to the throne, her father's decree, the so-called pragmatic sanction, would have helped. Through this document, Maria Theresa could also ensure her daughter would succeed to the throne if so entitled to.
She learned from experience this pragmatic solution was actually just a sheet of paper and actually brought nothing about. At once, she had to face defending her inheritance by waging war. This was because it remained firmly established in the public mind and that of her coterie that only an heir to the throne could be a dynasty's guarantor.
Amidst the Austrian War of Succession in March 1740, there was still hope of a male heir, even with the support from on high.
All will be well soon. In the Augustine Church, we've already called for prayer. It's never too late to. The baptismal fonts have been ordered and the baptismal candles blessed. I believe we've thought of everything. But we can give things a once-over to be sure. Yes, everything perfectly prepared. Let's content ourselves with that.
Countess Fuchs carefully supervised her beloved empress's pregnancies, which also entailed the creation of a very special diet. Pregnant women had to eat every 2 hours, and their digestion was also to be stimulated by wrapping their legs in vinegar-soaked cloth.
Speaking of cloth, I must have the bandages prepared. I've quite forgotten them. We must prepare 12 bandages a day for the children to be freshly swadded. The second of the 3 layers of cloth is soaked in beeswax so it doesn't leak as much. If it's a little boy, then yes, we fill the sheep's wool breeches with hay and straw. It makes for much easier changing. How elegant and novel. Ready the hay and straw.
All dreams would be fulfilled. On the 13th of March 1741, little Joseph was born. As the future Emperor Joseph II, he would reform the monarchy from the ground up. That same year, Maria Theresa would give her own governess a cosy castlet in what is Row Down today. The industrious chief mistress just had to have seen her simple room at Schönbrunn Palace more often.
I've been chief mistress for 5 years now. But the small things, which are ever so important, are always to be considered. Only have to lead the lady into the room. Laughable, really. There are now over 2,000 at court, not all of whom live off the leaders alone, although Her Majesty gave me my little castle, which was nice. I must nonetheless always stay there.
So close was Maria Theresa's relationship with Countess Fuchs, the Empress wanted to be by the latter's side in her final hours. To this day, the engraving on her sarcophagus shows Maria Theresa's love for her vixen, the only non-Habsburg to call the imperial crypt her final resting place. She lies buried beside her Maria Theresa. Princess Elisabeth Marie was the only daughter of Crown Prince Rudolf and Emperor Franz Joseph's favourite granddaughter, whose court's expectations she less than fulfilled. Known to her family by the Hungarian nickname Erzsi, she lost her father when she was 5 and made many decisions with her life that discarded all sense of convention at court. Upon her grandfather's death, she finally turned her back on the House of Habsburg, becoming a nonconformist and a convinced social democrat, nicknamed the Red Archduchess.
You mightn't know who you have in front of you. A woman must know where she comes from and where she's going. From the royal court, I came into Parliament, being the first woman to dare do so.
This Archduchess even proved able to break free from the Habsburgs' otherwise strict marriage policy, designed to secure dynastic ties.
Erzsi grew up as the pampered emperor's grandchild. She was accustomed to getting her own way and getting pretty much all she wished. This also had a bearing on her choice of men. After all, at 17, she fell for Otto Windisch-Graetz at a ball. She was far from considered an ideal suitor, although coming from aristocracy, as he wasn't high enough in the hierarchy.
Not only did Franz Joseph elevate Count Windischgratz to princehood for his granddaughter, but also let his Erzsi keep her title of Imperial Highness despite marrying below her station.
Yes, it's fine like this. Just leave it be. I'm not Mrs. So-and-so. I'm me. I'm not saying anything. I'd never dream of doing all you want. You needn't dare, and nor do I. But I will anyway. I alone determine what I advocate or stand for, to which my family will have to get accustomed.
Beset with jealousy and infidelity, marriage to Otto Windischgratz proved a perfect storm. During a bitter dispute over custody of their 4 children, some 100 Social Democrat workers blocked the entrance to her Schönau residence in Lower Austria to hinder execution of a judge's order to hand the children over to their father. This scandal even made international headlines, and litigation, compelled by the husband, had to be ceased. The children were at last given leave to remain with their mother.
The socialists like me very much. I've even joined the party as a member. Oh, Peppy, you'll have to change too and really wash up about it. Certainly, Comrade Majesty. Just as you wish. The Social Democrats, in particular, had long been great supporters of the monarchy. They had always seen this form of government as a great achievement. None other than future President Karl Renner would always appear at major conferences as a staunch advocate of the Austro-Hungarian monarchy. Only much later would this change, in 1918 to be precise, when he met Emperor Charles and realized the power of the throne overwhelmed the man sitting on it. This was untenable. Decades ago, my father recognized that something had to change fundamentally. However, his plans then were underhandedly thwarted. Crown Prince Rudolf was not a particularly passionate father in that he didn't spend a huge amount of time with his daughter. The Crown Prince died when his only daughter was aged 5. But I have to say, of course, she was a noble child, being born a hereditary princess, which meant she grew up at court, where it wasn't formed for parents to raise children. Although she spent little time with him, she got a great deal from him, also in inheritance terms. The poor relationship she had with her mother may have something with this too. These were 2 very different personalities. She always felt trapped. Her mother remarried and was mostly away. In the end, she rarely saw her mother and grew up rather lonely at the Viennese court.
After the early death of her father, the 5-year-old Archduchess had to cope with her grief all by herself. The recently deceased were not discussed at court. As she grew up, her distant yet kind grandfather, Franz Joseph, became a human support for his granddaughter. At the turn of the century, the emperor held balls for his Erzsi.
I love to dance. It's one of life's passions, how people look for their mate. In particular, when you're a debutante. I've always liked somewhat citing the well-to-do. My wardrobe was always à la mode. Tight-fitting apparel is how the gentlemen of all creation go on the prowl.
The Red Archduchess's image of the male was shaped by her father, Crown Prince Rudolf. In his father's favourite room at Hofburg in Vienna, the Turkish salon, he could draw his daughter into his personal realm, thus creating lasting memories for her.
I like to think of Luxembourg as well. Given Daddy and I would always go for walks and call on our friends there, the birds. He took me by the hand and said, "Erzsi, do you hear that? That's a bullfinch." He could distinguish between the birds. We'd call it our treasure. Nature was our treasure chest. In general, Crown Prince Rudolf was greatly interested in science. It was his dream to study biology at the University of Vienna, which his father forbade. Therefore, in the company he kept of, in the main, scholars, journalists, economists and university professors, he tried to cultivate his interest in birds. In the end, he was even afforded recognition as a scientist in ornithological circles.
Elizabeth's relationship with her father was out of love. Her relationship with her mother had been very difficult since childhood.
I mattered to her, even if selfishly, for her to at least hold on to something. After Papa died, she fled into her ailments, from one to the next. That, or she'd travel, like Grandmama. Where didn't matter, as long as it was out of Vienna. It's known that Elisabeth was no great friend to children, spending little time with her children. If anything, it was a nuisance she tolerated when visiting her daughters. Although she'd always bring gifts and ensured all her grandchildren were spoilt equally, she hadn't a close relationship with them.
As was customary amongst the Habsburgs, a whole team of governesses and tutors saw to the young Archduchess in the so-called children's chamber. She always had to cope with a strict daily routine.
I was taught by exceptional professors. Countess Coudenhofer was also very strict about ensuring I'd be a lady, which I'll never give up on. Once a princess, always a princess. You mightn't know with whom you're dealing. Peppy, quite enough, thank you. This really isn't suitable. Settle down.
You mightn't know who you're dealing with was the go-to phrase the Crown Princess used to introduce herself to the apparently uninformed, naturally assuming people knew her. This was similar to Empress Elisabeth, her grandmother, and not only in this respect.
You know, Peppy, Grandmama made contact with the dead. We'd laugh at her about it, of course. Spiritualism is important, even when not everyone can do it. I'm just like her that way. You must stand by an idea, sink or swim, which is why I turned my back on the court. Why should I have waited? If not now, then when? She'd already joined the Social Democrats in 1919, and to better convey the party's ideas from the start, a Mr. Deutsch gave her a member from Lower Austria to work with. He was a high school teacher, later becoming headmaster, called Leopold Petzneck from Mödling. She grew so close to him they even married a few decades later. So to speak, it was a case of the very high meeting the very low, and the left-wing press fell over themselves to describe how much of a fairy tale this new republic was, with an archduchess getting together with the son of a small farmer.
In 1929, Archduchess Elisabeth Marie sold Schönau Castle to live in the so-called Villa Windischgrätz, Hutteldorf district of Vienna. She held court here, even as Elisabeth Petzneck later on, just as she did at Schönbrunn. Here she'd often host artists and political thinkers as guests. Not only was Elisabeth Marie's life and marriage unusual for an archduchess, but also her final resting place. It's a simple, uninscribed grave in which her husband was also buried. These were three women whose lives couldn't be any more different. They all had to endure twists of fates and live through drama, but could also celebrate well-deserved triumphs. We'll probably forget none of them.